Walk yourself, my father said, smiling like he had won. That's what happens when you marry a nobody. He took Mom's arm, led her to the back row, and sat down to watch me cross the chapel alone. My bouquet shook so hard, one rose snapped near the stem. Whispers followed every step. Evan stood at the altar, stunned, while Dad leaned back like humiliation was entertainment. Halfway down the aisle, the doors behind me slammed open. 30 strangers in matching gray stepped inside. Their leader stopped beside my father and said, "Sir," before she takes another step, "everyone needs to know what you did." 8 months before my wedding, my family still looked perfect from the outside. Dad liked polished things, polished shoes, polished cars, polished stories. At Sunday dinners, he sat at the head of the table beneath a framed photo from Olivia's wedding, the one where he was walking her down the aisle with tears in his eyes and pride all over his face. Mom kept fresh coffee warm in a silver pot and moved quietly whenever tension entered the room. She could smooth a tablecloth with one hand and ignore a cruel sentence with the other. Olivia was Dad's favorite, though nobody said it out loud. She married Andrew, a financial advisor who wore expensive watches and always seemed to know when Dad wanted to hear himself agreed with. Their wedding had ice sculptures, a string quartet, and a cake so tall it needed its own table. Mine was supposed to be simpler. I was 34, worked as an interior designer, and had spent most of my life trying to become the kind of daughter who caused no problems. I remembered birthdays. I sent thank you notes. I apologized first, even when I had done nothing wrong. Then I met Evan Brooks. Evan was 36 and worked as an electrician. He drove an old pickup that smelled faintly of cedar, coffee, and clean work gloves. His hands were rough, but he always opened my car door like I was something precious. He had raised his younger sister, Grace, and his brother, Owen, after their parents died. He never used that story to impress anyone. I learned it from Grace months later, over pancakes at the little diner where Evan and I spent most Friday nights. That diner became our place. Red vinyl booths, burnt coffee, a waitress who called everyone honey. Evan would slide the sugar toward me before I asked, then listen like every word mattered. With him, I never felt managed. That scared Dad. The first time I brought Evan home, Mom had apple pie cooling by the window. Olivia and Andrew were already there. Dad looked at Evan's clean boots, his plain jacket, and the calluses near his thumb. Evan smiled and offered his hand. Dad glanced at it, then reached for his phone. "Excuse me?" he said, walking away. Evan slowly lowered his hand. That night, I apologized in the truck. He stared through the windshield and said, "Kate, I can handle him not liking me. I just don't want you spending your life apologizing for him. I should have listened then, but I still believed Dad would soften before the wedding, especially once he saw how carefully and completely Evan loved me." Thanksgiving was the first time Dad stopped pretending. Mom had set the table with her china, the kind she only used when she wanted the evening to look happier than it was. The room smelled like roasted turkey, butter, and the cinnamon candles she lit every November. Andrew was talking about a client who had bought a second vacation home when Dad looked across the table at Evan. "So," he said, cutting into his turkey, "when are you planning to get a real career?" The fork in my hand stopped halfway to my mouth. Evan looked at him. "I already have one." Dad gave a laugh. "You fix wiring. I'm a licensed electrician." Andrew lowered his eyes, but I saw the corner of his mouth move. Mom reached for the gravy. "Who wants more?" No one answered. I should have said something sharp. Instead, I said, "Dad, can we not do this tonight?" He leaned back. "I'm asking a fair question." Evan stayed calm through dessert. He even helped Mom carry plates to the kitchen, but in the truck, with rain tapping the windshield, he said, "You keep asking me to be patient. How long am I supposed to wait for him to see me as human?" I had no answer. 3 months later, Dad called Evan about an electrical problem at one of his renovation projects. He said the schedule was slipping and an outside contractor would cost too much. "Your family," Dad told him, "help me out." Evan did. He spent 4 days at the site and found overloaded circuits, damaged panels, and work that should never have passed inspection. He shut down one section. Dad was furious about the delay until Evan showed him what could have happened if the building had opened. Then Dad changed his tone. "Do whatever you need," he said. Evan bought materials, brought in 2 men from his crew, and worked late into the night. The total came to about $40,000. Dad promised payment after the project closed. It never came. Instead, he sent Evan a statement claiming the original problems had happened under Evan's supervision. If Evan signed it, Dad said he would release part of the money. Evan refused. Dad called me before Evan could explain. "He's trying to squeeze me," Dad said. "He sees our family as an easy paycheck." I wanted to believe that was impossible. Still, a small part of me wondered why Evan had kept the dispute from me. Grace was also acting secretive. She kept asking about the reception schedule and whether there would be space for a group photo. "It's a surprise for Evan," she said. "People he helped want to be there." I thought she meant a few co-workers. Then, 1 week before the wedding, I found a payment request on Dad's desk while dropping off place cards. $40,000. Unpaid. My name was written across the top in Dad's handwriting. "Call Kate before wedding." That was when I understood Evan had not hidden the truth to deceive me. He had hidden it to protect me from my own father. On the morning of my wedding, everything smelled like coffee, hairspray, and white roses. Sunlight pressed through the tall windows of the bridal suite, turning the mirrors gold. Rachel pinned my veil while Mom adjusted the pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother. For 1 quiet minute, I let myself believe the day might still be beautiful. Then Dad walked in. He closed the door behind him and laid a folded paper on the vanity. "We need to settle this before the ceremony," he said. My stomach tightened. Settle what Evan signs this, drops the $40,000, and agrees never to bring it up again. I stared at him. "You want him to take responsibility for work he did not cause." Dad's jaw hardened. "I want him to understand what joining this family requires. Behind me." The curling iron clicked off. Rachel stopped moving. I picked up the paper. My fingers shook so badly the page rattled. And if he refuses, Dad looked at my dress, my veil, the bouquet waiting beside the mirror. "Then I will not walk you down that aisle." For a second, I heard nothing except the low hum of the vent. "Dad, this is my wedding, and choices have consequences." I searched his face for some trace of guilt. There was none. "I am not asking Evan to lie for you." His mouth curved into a small, satisfied smile. "Walk yourself. That's what happens when you marry a nobody." Then he laughed. It was not nervous. It was not embarrassed. It was the laugh of a man who believed he had finally found the punishment I deserved. He left the room. I moved to the cracked door and looked into the chapel. Dad walked straight to the back row. Mom followed him. She smoothed her dress, placed her purse on her lap, and kept her eyes down. She knew. Olivia slipped into the room moments later. "Just get Evan to sign it," she whispered. "You can fix everything after the honeymoon." I looked at her. "You knew too." Her silence answered me. The room tilted. My lipstick stained the rim of the water glass. The bouquet stems dug into my palm. Mia, the coordinator, asked whether I wanted to postpone, but her words sounded far away. For one terrible moment, I wanted to tear off the veil and disappear. Then Rachel took both my hands. "What do you want to do?" I looked at my reflection. Red eyes. Perfect dress. No father beside me. "Remove his speech," I said. "Cancel the father-daughter dance. And the ceremony, I am still getting married." Grace appeared at the doorway, pale and breathless. "The people here for Evan's surprise are in the next room." "Kate, would you let them stand with you?" I could barely speak. But I nodded. The music began. I gripped my bouquet, lifted my chin, and walked toward the doors alone. I thought the worst moment was behind me. Then the chapel doors opened. Every guest turned, and I saw Dad lean back beside Mom, waiting patiently for me to break right there. The first step was the hardest. My heels struck the wood with a lonely sound. Every face turned toward me, then past me, searching for the father who should have been at my side. I heard dresses shifting, a program folding, someone whispering my name. Evan stood at the altar, pale and rigid. I wanted to look only at him, but Dad was in my line of sight. He sat beside Mom in the back row, his arms folded, like he was waiting for me to fail. I passed the row where he should have stood. My bouquet shook against my ribs. One white rose bent under my grip. Halfway down the aisle, the doors behind me swung open for 1 second. Hope rose in my chest. I thought Dad had changed his mind. Then 30 people in charcoal gray stepped into the chapel. They moved quietly, filling both sides of the aisle. Men and women, young apprentices, older workers. A woman I recognized from one of Evan's cookouts. A young father Evan had once covered for when his daughter was hospitalized. Grace stood behind them, tears in her eyes. Henry Collins walked at the front. He stopped beside Dad. "Sir," he said, calm enough to still the chapel, "you called him a nobody because you never asked who he was to the people standing here." Dad's face tightened. Henry did not raise his voice. "Evan found the electrical failures at your project before someone got hurt. He refused to sign a false statement. He kept 30 people working while repairs were made, and you still owe him about $40,000. A breath moved through the room. Dad stood. "This is not the place." Henry looked at him. "You made it the place." No one clapped. That made it stronger. The 30 people stayed, forming the family line my own family had denied me. I turned toward Evan and kept walking. By the time I reached him, tears were running down his face. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I kept asking you to endure him." He took my hands. "You don't have to apologize for what he chose." The officiant waited until I could breathe again. Then she asked, "Who gives Kate to be married?" I looked back. Dad was still standing. Mom was staring at her lap. I faced Evan. "No one is giving me away," I said. "I'm choosing him." That was the first time Dad lost control of the story. The second came at the reception. His speech had been removed. But halfway through dinner, he took the microphone from the band leader. He smiled at the room as if nothing had happened. "Families make sacrifices," he began. "Sometimes parents carry burdens their children never understand." My stomach turned. He talked about standards, responsibility, gratitude. Then he said he hoped Evan would someday become the kind of husband who could stand on his own without relying on Kate's family. I set down my glass. Evan touched my wrist. "You don't have to." "Yes," I said. "I do." I walked to the microphone. Dad held it away for a second. I stared until he let go. "My father is right about one thing," I said. "Families do carry burdens." The room went silent. Evan and I paid every bill for this wedding over the last 2 years. I gave my parents about $60,000 when Dad's business was struggling. Evan completed about $40,000 of emergency work on Dad's project. Dad has not paid him. Dad's face darkened. "Kate, stop." And this morning, he offered to walk me down the aisle if Evan signed a false statement and gave up the money. "That is not what happened." Henry stood from his table. "I reviewed the site issue," he said. "What Kate said is accurate." Dad looked around, searching for someone to rescue him. Andrew stared at his plate. Olivia looked away. Mom covered her mouth. I turned back to Dad. "There will be no father-daughter dance. You will not speak again tonight. I will not pay another one of your bills. Evan will pursue what he is owed through the proper process." His voice dropped. "You are humiliating this family." "No," I said. "I am done protecting the person who humiliated it." I handed the microphone to the band leader. Then Grace and Owen joined us on the dance floor. A moment later, the 30 people in gray stepped forward too. Dad remained alone at his table, surrounded by the one thing he could not control, the truth. For 3 days after the wedding, Dad did not call. Mom did. Her first message said, "You embarrassed him in front of everyone." I listened to it twice, sitting at our kitchen table with one of Grandma's pearl earrings in my palm. The other was still tucked inside the velvet box from the wedding. I had taken them off before bed and could not bring myself to put them away. When Mom called again, I answered. "Did you know what he planned to do?" I asked. Silence. Then she said, "I thought he would calm down." "That is not an answer." Her breath caught. Yes, the word hurt more than I expected. "You watched him use my wedding to pressure Evan, and you still sat beside him." I was trying to keep the family together. "No," I said. "You were trying to keep Dad comfortable." She started crying. For once. I did not rush to soothe her. I told her I loved her, but I would not discuss reconciliation until she could admit that staying quiet had been a choice. Olivia did not contact me for nearly 2 weeks. Andrew sent Evan a short message saying he wanted no part of the dispute. It was the safest answer possible, which made it exactly what I expected. Evan handled the unpaid work through the proper process. Henry provided a written account of the site conditions, the repairs, and the conversations he had witnessed. We did not threaten Dad. We did not post anything online. We simply stopped allowing him to decide which truths counted. 6 weeks later, the full $40,000 arrived. There was no apology attached. By then, I had also stopped paying my parents' household bills. Dad sold a vacation property he rarely used. Olivia called Mom in a panic when she realized the man she thought controlled everyone with money had quietly depended on mine. That was when the family story finally cracked. Mom came to see me alone one cold Sunday afternoon. She sat in our living room, twisting a tissue between her fingers. I kept telling myself silence was neutral, she said. It was not. I did not forgive her on the spot, but I believed that sentence was the first honest thing she had said in years. Dad's letter came 2 days later. He admitted he had used Evan's skill while looking down on his work. He admitted he had treated my love like a reward he could withhold. He admitted the walk down the aisle had never been about protecting me. It had been about punishing me. I read the letter at the diner where Evan and I used to meet after his late shifts. The coffee was still burnt. The red booth still squeaked. Outside, snow gathered along the curb. "Are you going to answer?" Evan asked. "Not yet." He nodded. No pressure, no lecture. Months later, I volunteered with a family support program, helping people find counseling and guidance when relatives used money or affection to control them. I could not rewrite my wedding, but I could help someone recognize the signs sooner. That night, I pressed the damaged white rose from my bouquet between the pages of our wedding album. It was bruised, flattened, and no longer perfect, but it had survived. So had I. That night, at the diner, Dad's letter stayed folded in my purse. I still did not know whether I would forgive him, but I was no longer afraid of losing him by choosing myself. Evan had never been a nobody. The 30 people in gray did not create his worth. They only revealed what my family refused to see. Love does not control, humiliate, or demand silence. It protects. It tells the truth. If you have ever had to protect someone you love from your own family, share your story in the comments and subscribe for the next one.